Hi everyone, I'm Al Bain and this is the Taxi Studio Be More Fearless podcast series. And today we're going to chat around one of the 5 stages of fear. And the 5 stages of fear as we see them are imagination, fear itself, paralysis, acceleration, and memories. And today we're going to be talking around the stage of fear with our guest, Kelly Oakley. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi.
So Kelly, I think it's fair to say you're an incredible ward sister in an acute stroke unit that obviously has like high dependency individuals in there as well. And you're operating within the great British NHS. And let's be honest, that's no mean feat. I know also that, you're married with 3 young, incredible children. So I'm guessing you must be great at balancing roles and tasks. And I think it's fair to say you've always been obsessed by nursing since a young child. When we spoke before, you said you're either nursing or caring for all your teddies and dollies at a young age. So I think, it's always been in your DNA to end up being a nurse like this, which is incredible. So your career has included dealing with direct admissions via helicopter into ward, where urgency has obviously been key. And you qualified in 2003 and went into neurology, and then general admissions where you specialised, but your heart brought you back into the ward for the long shifts and personal rewards and for care. You obviously love what you do and have a huge passion for it. So thanks, Kelly. So I think that's for everybody to understand. What you do is incredible, and it's not what most people see or even can comprehend what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's really fair to say today that having the opportunity to discuss fear with you will be quite interesting. So I'd love to just kick off and just remind and tell the listeners a little bit about what fear is from a stage point of view. So fear is when we confront either a self-initiated or when we're focused on our fear head on. And often our system 1 thinking kicks in at that point, and it's where we experience speed and intuition takes precedence. Fear moves beyond the brain into the body. Our hands sweat or our heart beats faster, and we might shake, but our subconscious autopilot basically takes over. That's the stage that we're kind of talking about. Like, so previously, it's that where we've moved in, having just been in imagination of worrying about it, if you like, we actually start to physically experience it. So I thought maybe, Kelly, it'd be a good idea to potentially open up with asking a question about what do you fear most in life? Is there something that potentially that you think, oh crikey, that I fear that?
I thought about this a lot actually, and strangely, this might come across a little bit odd. Most people would say illness or losing a loved one. Obviously, losing a loved one is high up there, but illness itself is not something I really fear. I think because I live and breathe it so often and I'm faced with it week in, week out. The main thing that I fear, and this is the absolute truth, which part of me thinks, oh God, do I want to admit it? I've got a real fear of sort of failure and not being able to provide. And I think it comes from childhood. I've spoken a lot with Matt about it since our previous discussion. And that is a big fear of mine. I think that's one of the reasons I became a nurse. I've always wanted to be a nurse, but the career itself was really attractive to me because I always wanted a job where I knew I would have a job for life and have those skills. That is a big thing, providing for the family and making sure they're safe and looked after. That is a huge deal for me in life, actually.
That's an incredible admission, thanks. And it's fair to say that I don't think you're alone on that. So don't harbour that one to yourself. I think there'd be more people out there that would admit to the same thing. And I think actually, I don't think we should acknowledge that fear is a good thing, but it's probably a good one to worry about. I think that gives us a centre of gravity and gives us the force to succeed in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's brought upon us by in our experiences and our impressions before, doesn't it? I mean, like similarly, I've got a fear of I've got a couple of 2 very different ones I was going to mention. I've got a fear of life passing me by, and that's brought on by the fact that I lost my mother sort of 14 years ago. She was 58 and was quite ill for some time before that. So I'm always driven by in the same way wanting to try do lots of different things because I don't I'm 48 now, but I don't worry about it so much. But I remember when she first passed, my internal clock started ticking, So like their fears are like, you know, they come from really these kind of rational experiences that we have in life. And, you know, like I had another one as well, which was, I was thinking about it. So that was like one I think I had in later life. And I had another one in younger life. So basically I had a massive fear of the dentist, which has moved right through with me from right into adult until actually quite recently. And that was born out of the fact that I had both my top and bottom front teeth removed at the same time when I was quite little. Then I didn't grow any teeth for like 2 years. So I think that Harvard manifested as something horrible inside me, where I stopped going to the dentist for years, like sort of like 10 years. And it's only
Yeah.
recently I've managed to, like, through like lots of like practice and breathing exercises and stuff, managed to go and get that stuff done now. But it's funny the effect that it has on you, isn't it? And because it lasts forever, but it becomes like this driving force, like you said. It becomes something where you think, I think if you do it in the right way, like you are now, it's become something good, isn't it? You know, you do provide it. You do live a full life doing an incredibly rewarding job. So
Yeah, I think it comes from my dad. Worked incredibly hard when we were younger. He was a self-employed carpenter, and just his nature and his personality, he wasn't very aggressive in his nature, and quite often, you know, he wouldn't get paid for jobs and things like that. And I witnessed that stress within the family and how that affected the family financially. And I always remember thinking, oh, I just don't want to be in this situation. And that's ingrained in me. And funny enough, I was talking to my sister yesterday. She's a police officer, and she said the same. She always felt she needed a career that would be rewarding, but also a career that she felt safe in
yeah,
and
safe.
security.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are all good things, though, aren't they? We think of these things as fear, but actually, if we manifest them in the right way, they give us positive things back. That was a very honest answer. Thanks very much. I super appreciate that. Great. So, like, moving through, I was going to talk about like the fact that we've touched upon like your incredible career today, including your stint in neurology and the focus on the brain. And you know, the brain is an incredible tool, isn't it? You know, it kind of like it inspires me, and it also frightens me, the brain, a little bit.
definitely. Yeah.
I think it has like this really incredible power to do amazing things and heal our bodies, but also it has like this really destructive side, I think, where basically it has the ability to tell us that we're failing or we're doing bad things, or actually point us in the direction of stuff which isn't right. So I mean, would you say that's kind of like a true, I know that's a very brief synopsis of how the brain works, but it's kind of made up of these two parts, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, physically, if something goes wrong with the brain, you know, stroke or anything like that, it impacts your whole body. So yeah, it is, you know, a very important organ mentally and physically, is the be all and end all, really, isn't it? Of
Yeah. I mean, it literally dictates everything we do, but I think we'll come on to it later. I think like one of the interesting things is that you probably do in your day-to-day role is you help people adjust and retrain that a little bit, you
Yeah,
know.
of course, yeah, and it has the ability to be retrained. That's the beauty of it. Although so delicate, you know, I've witnessed some things where people have injured their heads so slightly and it's had catastrophic effects. So an organ that's so delicate but actually can rejuvenate somewhat and can be retrained. And we've got some fantastic neurophysios that and psychologists that, you know, do absolute wonders through the training they do with patients and the rehabilitation. So it is a wonderful organ that can be molded.
Thanks for that. So you obviously see like a range of patients in your role that are affected by fear. And I imagine, I was thinking about like they potentially could fall into two camps. So I think maybe you experience and see people that are gripped by an experience they're conscious of when they arrive at a hospital from an incident. Okay, so they're aware of like what they've been through, so that would have an
Yeah.
effect. But there are also maybe people that I imagine are unaware because of what's happened, and it's when they come round from that that they need to understand what has happened to them. So I was just going to ask you, like, do you see how they process fear differently in those two different camps? So like when someone's presented you with you that's conscious, are they different to maybe like when you have to inform somebody when maybe they've come around for not that they weren't aware of?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the whole coming into hospital if you're conscious is frightening. You know, if you come in through A&E, you're witness to lots of things that are going on. Obviously you come in, there's lots of other patients around you that are more unwell, more sick, which as medical staff sometimes we forget that people are witnessing those things, because they're there all the time for us, but for them, they come into a bay and there might be 6 other patients in there, you know, with all sorts of things going on, and these people that just come in are looking at them thinking, oh God. So yes, of course. And then you have patients that come in unconscious, and as they gradually come round, that's a different type of fear. Generally, it's not such an acute fear. I think that's more of a realization of what's going to happen to me. Am I going to recover from this? So it's a more sort of slow fear, if you like. Whereas patients that come in, you know, during the night, quite often during the night, unwell, acutely unwell, they are acutely afraid, rather than that sort of slow burning realization that things might be different for them.
Oh yeah, no, and that's quite interesting. Yeah, because I mean, imagine also like when people are conscious and coming in, like you're dealing with like high levels of cortisol and adrenaline as well, aren't you? So
Yeah.
everything, like you say, is at max, and they're processing lots of things at the same time. You know, like, you know, being whisked around, people trying to sort things out, as well as like them being plagued by the thought and worry of what's ahead. So I can then actually imagine that the people that have like come round and you're having to explain that, like, you know, they've been through something traumatic, and you know they might have some time around to like healing, or like it might even like be damaging to their life onwards. It could almost be a bit like a tsunami, isn't it? It's a bit like you see a small ripple out at sea.
Yeah.
At a time over a couple of days, that fear could build, I imagine,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
realize,
Yeah.
yeah, that realization is delivered in a completely different way, isn't it? And I imagine, like, it's quite interesting you picked up on, like, you know, often patients arrive with like families as well, and I imagine in that instance, do you think it's quite infectious fear at that point?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, and we develop skills over years of experience of how to try and sort of calm that. So yeah, families have a huge impact on the way the patient feels, without a doubt. And from the minute they come in, you can notice how this is going to pan out, and whether you need to ask the family to sort of take a break, or sometimes we do ask them to leave, you know, if they're highly strung and you know, not having a good effect on the patient, because obviously we don't want them to be terrified. It's no good for their health. That is a difficult thing to sort of overcome without causing any more distress to those people involved.
Yeah, and I imagine that's what you're trying to, you're managing so many different multiple things. You know, I've got to take my hat off to you. Like, not only are you like trying to process and understand A, what's happened, B, work out how to fix that, but then also dealing with all these other bits alongside. It's do you actually, I've got a question that's just come to me actually. Do you have different like members in your team to like handle those different things?
Yeah, so for example, when I worked last Thursday, we had a young patient come in who was quite unwell, although conscious, and that patient was really frightened, but I needed to do quite a few things for that patient. So and I was working with another colleague, a healthcare assistant, who we sort of play off each other. She knew straight away what she needed to do. I knew what I needed to do. And she took the family into the day room and spoke to them at length, and, you know, gave them the information about the ward, provided them with tea and toast, you know, all those little things that really, you know, bring stress levels down, whilst I could deal with the patient and do all the medical things that were needed and all those bits and bobs. So we do work together to make things as seamless as possible.
No, yeah, no, well, I can imagine that, because you're actually managing fear in its manifestation across in different,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
which, you know, we'll come on to later and talk about some of those different bits I was thinking about in how you process and support that. But yeah, there's so many different things going on. It's I imagine experience is your key ally there, isn't it?
Definitely.
I mean, how did like, just skipping around a little bit now in my own head, like how did that play out for you in your younger career? Like, because it could almost, like from the outside in, from what I'm listening to, it's almost overwhelming just for myself. I'm like, wow, how do you cope with all that? But when you just start off, I imagine in your career, it must be daunting in a positive way, because you know you're passionate about what you do. But like, I imagine experience is your ally, isn't it, over time?
Oh, definitely. I mean, nurses, medical staff, we're a different breed, really. And you sort of, you stick together. So even when you're a student nurse, you have a huge social network of other student nurses, and again when you qualify, and you do stick together. You know, we have lots of WhatsApp groups and things, and quite often you're messaging, was Mr. A okay today? You know, I'm worried about him. Yeah, everything's fine. Are you okay? Is everything okay? So we do stick together and we support each other lots. And as you get further down your career, you notice people that are struggling or stressed or are frightened or have experienced something on the ward that's, you know, knocked them a bit. You do notice, and you do sort of seek them out to support them. And support is the key, definitely being able to talk to each other, and being able to offload those things, or just having reassurance, actually, because it is a career where you do suffer a lot of anxiety, without a doubt. Even now, myself, I'm 17, 18 years in, you know, sometimes I'll wake up from a night shift and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and I know I've done something, but the anxiety comes over me because the patient was quite unwell, and I'm thinking, did I, you know, is that patient okay? Did I do this? And I have to sort of speak to somebody to get rid of that fear, which is ridiculous, but I think that is just the nature of the job.
I think that's based purely because of the passion that you have inside you. You know, if you didn't have that, I don't think you'd be that person, would you?
No, exactly. No, definitely. And, you know, we got quite an infrastructure set within nursing on a ward. So you have, you know, you have your senior sister who runs the whole unit. Very difficult job, very challenging job. And then you have your ward sisters, of which I'm one. So we have 10 on my ward. Then you have your staff nurses, and then your HAs, and you know, you all support each other as a triple down effect. And that's your job, to look after each other, because if people aren't well, they won't perform their best. And you know, you'll have people going off sick left, right and centre with stress and all sorts of things if you don't keep an eye on them and offer that support.
And that's really good to hear, actually, because it was one of the questions I had penned for later on, which you've started answering then, and it was about specifically how do you and your teams deal with fear when you come across it all the time. And I was gonna ask, like, do you sideline it? Do you talk about it collectively? Do you have like counselling in place? Very fact that you've got this framework of support for each other is, and you know, that nurturing nursing thing goes hand in hand again, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, it definitely does. And you know, you see the new staff nurses come in, the very bottom, you know, the very new ones, and bless them, sometimes they're like a hare in the headlights, and you keep your eye out for them, and you let them do what they need to do, but you keep your eye out for them, and you make sure you speak to them at the end of the shift and go through things with them, so they feel, I don't want them to go home and worry, you know, I want them to go home and feel comfortable, but they also know that we've developed that sort of environment where they know they can come to us at any time. I would never be cross if somebody rang me at home or messaged me, because I've been there and I know what it's like to, you know, we're not dealing with normal things, we're dealing with quite extreme circumstances a lot of the time. And that obviously does instill a little bit of fear and anxiety in most people. So
That's lovely to learn that. Do you know what? My take out from that is that it's reassuring to know that you all collectively have each other's backs. And I think, you know, particularly in the current time that we've had, like the limelight that, you know, you guys and gals have been in, because of the thanks that, you know, the entire nation and the world is thankful for the extra work that you guys have been putting in. But knowing that there is that framework is a lovely thing. And if only, I think, to be quite frank, more business sectors in different verticals adopt that, it'd be a good thing. You know, I think, you know, culture and looking after people is becoming more and more aware across multiple businesses, but I think there are still like huge swathes of sectors where, like, you know, when you look at what I think of like manufacturing and stuff like that, where I don't think that stuff comes naturally. There's still that ability of like human interaction is key, isn't it? And being able to talk about stuff, you know, I think that's one of the key things about fear, isn't it? Like, you can help work through a fear if you actually are given and presented the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. It's got better over the years, actually. So the NHS has brought in lots of different things over the years. So we have something called EAP, Employment Assistant Program, where you can just self-refer yourself to go and talk to them about anything that's happened in your career, and they're fantastic, and they'll point you in the right direction of you know, different people within the trust that can help you. And obviously we're all registered with the union as well, which is really good. They're really good help. And we've also bring in this thing, which is where lots of discipline, lots of professionals from around the trust can go, and they'll talk about something stressful that's happened in the trust that week. It could be a stressful death, or it could be it's like a case study, if you like, and they talk about it, and all these different professionals add in their views, and it's really, really interesting. It's really, sometimes there's lots of tears from people, but it's really cathartic, and you do learn a lot from it.
Well, that's good to hear as well,
That's quite
actually.
new. Yeah,
It was one of my points I was going to make just now about because you referenced it again earlier. This is a career where obviously you have an enormous encyclopedic amount of like a recall to like deal with stuff, but also you're always learning, I imagine. Do you know what I mean? Because like
yeah,
all cases are different on in a case by case basis. So actually having that opportunity to then deconstruct and learn from it again, that's great, because that, again, like, let's be honest, that's one of the compartments that we can, you know, battle fear against, because we breed familiarity and understand like actually what truths are or how we can affect outcomes. So that's, you know, that's super lovely to hear and understand all that. Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you also mentioned, you know, like, you know, sometimes you're dealing with, you know, like, you know, bad endings or like traumatic events themselves, and I was just going to ask like how you compartmentalize that stuff, you know, because I've got a friend actually who's in the fire brigade, and you know, in like he's actually quite an extreme person now, like with regards to like where his needle like normal is, like, so like
yeah,
when
yeah,
we go out and do stuff like whether it be mountain biking and stuff, he's like right off the scale. It's like his
yeah,
needle normal is just like bumped along like so far from because like the exposure of like this stuff, you know, it's not, I don't get to see that stuff on a day-to-day basis, you know, like most people don't. So how do you compartmentalize that yourself and process, like, you know, so when you walk out of work and come back, you know, and be mum at home with all the kids, how do you?
yeah. It's difficult, actually. You know, sometimes you do. Again, with years of experience, you get better at sort of, you know, putting things to the back in a little place somewhere and think about it later. But yeah, it is difficult, and sometimes when you've had some really harrowing deaths or really horrible situations, just to sort of, you know, be able to process that, so you can come home with a clean slate, if you like, and crack on with family life, that it, you know, thinking about it all the time. Again, it is talking to colleagues. Uh, Quite often you'll have a text, was your shift okay today? Yeah, fine. You know, it is talking about it, and just knowing that you've done your best, and thinking that way.
I think that's really good. So I was just going to say then that actually, like, you know, like sharing is caring,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it
I know,
really is. Yeah,
like,
it really is.
and actually, I think the other really important note that you made then was having self-awareness that you've done a good job. That's
Yeah,
really key,
it's
isn't it?
really hard to have that, and you find that with a lot of junior nurses. You know, they constantly evaluate what they've done, and could I've done more, and that is a big part, to have to go through. I worked not long ago actually with a lovely junior nurse who had a really horrible situation with a patient that died really quickly, and it was really difficult. The family were very shocked, And I just had to go through with her step by step to make her aware that everything she did to the best of her ability. And actually, if there were some little things that she could have done better to support the family or what have you, that all comes with learning. And we're all, we're all a big team. We would never leave her to do it all by herself. So other people would pick up that if for example, she didn't give, information about, I don't know, what to do after death, for example. I noticed she hadn't. I picked it up, and that's how it works.
You look after each other. You have each other.
Yeah, exactly. Because we are
that's
only human.
Yeah, only human. But actually, like, having spoken to on one of our other podcasts to a chap that was special forces, having each other's back is super important, and it's how like the military works. So actually, it doesn't surprise me that some of that like regulation falls into the roles and the rigors of what the system that you work in, because that's what gives you a great foundation to work from. So these are all good things to hear about. I was just thinking about like children. Obviously, you've got children, which are like, what ages are they about?
10, 7 and 2.
10, 7 and 2. So I've got two girls actually. My girls are like 18 and 23, and having seen them grown up has been incredible. And I've got an opinion about this, so I was just going to ask you, like, how do you think children differ with how they deal with fear? Because I've seen how my children and girls do it, and they both do it differently, because obviously they're two different people.
Yeah.
I also am quite familiar with that. I read and up on an experiment that was done years ago around, I don't know if you're familiar with this story, around the haunted house, where actually when children, when they were kind of like ushered into like, a kind of a fun fair haunted house, they were given the opportunity at any point to like say that they wanted out. But actually, as a child in this experiment, children, it is proven, basically, as much as they seemingly hate the experience of fear and the anxiety that it builds with them, they all complete going right through every room in the house generally. And so there's this little bit around, I think, the human component of curiosity almost overtakes it sometimes as a child, and I think that's quite an interesting thing that I've observed, and I've seen it in my own children. But is that something you see with like yours? Have you got maybe one or two of the characters in your home stable that are like potentially like not so fearful as others?
Oh, definitely. Poppy is really she doesn't have much fear. And she would want to experience, to make sure. So for example, if you said to her, in that room over there's a huge big, I don't know, tiger in that room, she would have to go and have a look just to see if that tiger was in there. Whereas Sam is totally different, and he would, no way, I'm not. He's a totally different character. She's more inquisitive, and I think she's less aware of fear. So Sam's more of danger. She's less aware of danger and things like that, so she's less fearful. Whereas Sam is constantly making up scenarios in his head of things that could go wrong. So he's got a lot more of that sort of innate fear in him.
Is Sam the elder one, isn't he?
No, the middle one. Poppy's the elder one.
Yeah. Just wondering, like, because I'm just randomly thinking then, like, maybe like middle or older children, maybe they're a little bit more fearful of some experiences because they're the ones that are like initiating and trying for the first time. Whereas like, like young siblings sometimes often have the strength of conviction and confidence of their bigger siblings around them. Maybe have gone there before or can give them advice. And again, I think fear for like children is born out of some of these other stages, isn't it? I think a lot of the time they haven't got the memory stage. They haven't had that before, then they have absolutely nothing to fear of, do they? If they've not walked through that door, they've not looked over a cliff and had to worry about it, then of course, constantly I've weirdly got a bit of a weird thing with heights, although I do broach it in different ways and get around it. But like constantly, I remember as my kids was small and they go near edge, I'd be like fretting, like trying to keep them away from it.
Yeah.
Whereas actually they don't have that, do they? They don't have that innate like worry of like, what's wrong with the edge, Dad? Is it okay? And I think that's quite a really good like parallel to draw and talk about, like the difference between like how children process it and adults. And I think, like, you know, it's one of the things I think would really help a lot of the adults in this world is if we were allowed to like help and retrain ourselves to be a slightly more curious and not over worry. I think that's one of the things that's, you know,
Yeah, hold you
plagues us
back.
as apples, plagues us as adults, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, we get held back because we're not only have we got like our own brains like informing us of like the memories and the imagination of like what we think is going wrong. You know, in current like world of like social media, we're actually being bombarded by so much stuff that it becomes you can't navigate through that very easily, can you?
No, definitely.
So
Yeah.
that's super interesting as well. Thank you. I was gonna ask about like just the current situation a little bit with regards to the global pandemic. Unfortunately, having to say that word, you know, and I just wondered how that might have changed the feeling or the general atmosphere in your workplace. Do you think
Yeah, of
there was a
course.
shift in that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's totally changed. So the whole, you know, as nurses, we're quite what's the word?
Resilient?
No, we're quite you know, we like to be together, you know, and the power of touch and things like that make a huge difference to be able to sort of say to your colleague, you've done really well there, you know, we're very tactile bunch. And so to have that taken away from us was really difficult. You know, we would have our morning huddles and we'd all be, you know, we'd all stand quite close and all talk about what had happened during the night with the patients, and that's a huge debrief in itself. And of course that's had to stop somewhat. We all had to stand way apart and we can't you know, you can't do that anymore. And obviously as well, not being able to have relatives in was really, really difficult, and you really did see the impact that that had on patients. Really sad. Really, really sad. And having to, you know, patients dying without their family there, that's something I never want to experience again, really. You know, we are allowing more people to come in now, but when it was the deep, dark time when COVID was, you know, first, when we were in really deep lockdown, nobody was allowed in, nobody. So you'd have, you know, very young patients in their 40s, extremely unwell, you know, pass away without anybody there. Hideous, absolutely hideous. So that's something that I think will stay with a lot of medical professionals for the rest of our career, actually, having to deal with those scenarios.
Yeah,
And I'm
difficult.
hoping we will we will get back to normal. I hope, but we're still very, you know, it's still strange times. We're not allowed to be, you know, as tactile as we once would. The power of touch and the power of being able to give a relative a hug, or even a patient, you know, we can't spend that time with patients that we used to be able to do to, you know, make them feel more comfortable. Hoping that will come back, because that's sort of inbred in us, really, as nurses.
I think that's a really important and powerful ally again that you just mentioned, the power of touch. Actually,
Yeah,
we were talking, you know, we've been talking quite a lot about like thought processes and experiences and memories and imagination, but actually the power of being able to a be present, b like, you know,
yeah,
be listen, and then also the power of like connectivity and touch. You know, they're hugely powerful in combating fear, aren't they? uh,
oh gosh, yeah.
I mean, it leads me like nicely into like, you know, coming into like a sort of summary of our chat, really. Like, you know, how do you help people overcome when they're really frozen and fixated by something? What sort of tools or learning processes or like, you know, points of discussion can you give somebody to like help them change their thinking about something? What?
Do you mean a relative or a patient or like a member of staff?
It could be either or. Is it different or is it similar for all of them?
No, I guess it is similar. You know, I would always take them away from the situation that they're fearful of, take them away from that. And, you know, I wouldn't sugarcoat it. I would say this is happening. This is, you know, this is not great. This is happening. However, and then put a positive slant on it always. You know, you've done a fantastic job. The patient is comfortable, or your mum is comfortable. She's with us. We're doing all we can. Again, the power of touch is just in us, I think. You know, always have that hand, to be able to put that hand on somebody's shoulder. It just really helps, I'm sure. And also just to give them, you know, what's happening next. I think that's really important. Always what's happening next. You know, this is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to try to do. This is what the outcome could be. Making sure they have that information. Information is the key in communication, definitely. So they feel that somebody has it in hand, the situation in hand. And that goes for staff as well as patients and as well as relatives.
That's great, actually. I think, you know, again, there was a couple of lovely really bits. I think the ability to transport somebody to a more positive place, again, is super key in about how you can combat fear. You know, that's actually a really lovely thing, isn't it, actually? And it takes me back a little bit to my childhood a little bit, isn't it? And I think about, you think about like when you're nurtured by like your parents or carers or whoever looked after you, like that, you know, even when you fall over and you graze your knee, isn't it, your mum would like brush you down, or your dad brush you down, and like you know, like, think about this over here, you know. And actually that's it seems like such a simple thing, but actually the power of being able to literally transport and move you away from like the current fixation, that's a really powerful tool. And again, it's one that I think people could like practice understanding how they can harness that in a better way. And one of the other bits you were talking about then is, you know, again, it's the clarity of the process.
Yeah, definitely. Communication is massive. You know, if you don't know what's happening in a situation, your fear is going to be imploded, isn't it? So if you know, if you have a relative come in and they're really unwell and you just don't know what's going on, that is the worst. I think you need to be super honest and tell them what's happening. You know, they're really sick, or, you know, we're having trouble stabilizing them, but this is what we are doing to help them. This is the positive bit. This is what we're doing. And that will help anybody to feel more in control of their fear.
Yeah, I think it's a really good spot and a great discussion point. Thanks. The clarity of process. Again, weirdly, when I think about it in context of other conversations I've had recently, I think again that's quite similar to like some of the military stuff. Actually, you know, like being able to get people to do, you know, extreme things is built around the fact that you deal with one thing at a time, and actually you give clarity about what comes next and what's gone before. And the power of the process is your ally again, which is lovely. Thank you. I just also wanted to ask you specifically about whether people that are much older in a much later stage of life, do you think they worry as much or not? Like,
No, because it's strange, isn't it? Because I I think you enter a different phase. Actually, what I've seen, you know, we have all ranges of age on my ward, from 30s to 100, and the younger patients that come in generally have so much more to worry about, because they're worrying about their children or their wife, or, you know, oh God, this has happened to me, how am I going to do this, how am I going to do that? Because I think when you're a little bit later on in life, it's strange. They're obviously worried, you know, I don't want to be unwell, but they're more worried about them. They have themselves to worry about, and then they have other people worrying about them because they have their daughter or their son, who are generally grown up, to worry about them. So it's different. It's really different. I had a young guy in last week, same age as me actually, which did instill a slight bit of fear. Lovely chap who had 3 children, and all he could think about was his children. He, you know, he'd had a big thing happen to him, and he couldn't even process what had gone on with himself. He wasn't at that stage. He just needed to know that was everything going to be okay for his children and his wife.
Yeah.
You know,
I can
not even about himself. That's so.
that's
Quite
key, isn't it?
key.
Yeah.
Mm.
How that that shift of like subject matter and worry like changes as you evolve as an adult. Like you said, I think that's quite key in understanding that, you know, people in their early to midlife are worrying about directly the effect it has on their immediate circle, whereas like later on, you know, you become a little bit more worried about yourself, but then have all these other people putting worry and fear almost on you, which could be, you know, that's quite a different situation to deal with, I imagine, as well. If you were in a situation but trying to be positive, but have those that are around you like worrying for you, that, you know, that's almost comes back to that kind of like that immersive, you know, crowd feeling of like, you know, can this get passed on? You almost want to combat it a little bit. So yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, like managing all of those bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But this has been an incredible chat, Kelly. I've absolutely loved it. We've discussed like so many like different little bits and pieces, and unearthed. I've got on a massive list of like, you know, like builds and learnings here from our chat. There's an incredible amount actually. But for the first and foremost, it's also positive. I think you know, one of the bits that's been underlying like through lots of the bits we've talked about today has been around hope, isn't it? I think, and the power of that is super phenomenal, isn't it? You know, because if you can visualize it a little bit and remain positive in your hope and your outlook, I think that has you know, an effect on not just yourself but the others around you as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely, of course. Yeah, sure. And that's one thing during sort of this whole COVID situation. You know, everybody trying to stay positive. You know, we are wearing PPE all the time. It is really stressful. Some nurses are really afraid, but just trying to be a little bit light-hearted about the whole thing and staying positive because we have to do it, and it is what we have to do, and not to instill that you know, mass panic amongst everybody, which when it first started, you know, you could feel it going that way a little bit with staff and with medical staff. You could feel that some people were so panicked. So we've managed to sort of do that through positivity and all being together, if you like. And
yeah, but like having each other there, I think, you know, that's super important, because like you said, otherwise it gets the better of you, doesn't it? And I think that's the key thing with like fear, is like that we don't want it to like get the better of us. And I think like, you know, the things that we've discussed and you've shared today have been like super powerful with regards to like a little, I think I could compile a little kit of tools to combat fear. And I think if we were going to talk about that in like summary, I think things that we've learned today in our little kit, we would have like how experience builds resilience. And you know, we're always learning, you know, like, and actually having the ability to learn all the time also combats fear itself. Making sure that we're there for others around us, you know, that together bit, like you said, it is super important, and the power of like empathy, having the opportunity to like, you know, visualize and think about putting ourselves into a more positive space, and the clarity of process. But I think, you know, also one of the most powerful comments that you said today is self-awareness. I think, you know, giving yourself that ability to understand when you've done a good job. And even like, you know, no matter what side of the table you're on, whether you're fighting for yourself or fighting for somebody else, you know, it's like having the ability to go, well, actually this is what good looks like. So it's been super fun. Thanks, Kelly. I've really enjoyed that. I feel like I'm I feel like I'm so much more better armed to deal with like fear now, and hopefully our listeners will agree with that. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
I guess as well, just being kind to yourself, you know, giving yourself a break actually does help, because just giving yourself a break. So like I said to you, lots of nurses and lots of medical staff, we do suffer quite a bit with anxiety, unfortunately, because I just think it's having that a huge pressure of somebody's life on your shoulders. And sometimes you do go home, you think, I'm gonna have 24 hours now of worrying about, you know, my shift. And it's just sometimes being able to say to yourself, no, actually, you did a good job. You did everything you could, because you know you did. You know you did in your mind. You know you did everything you could. And, you know, most nurses like myself, I check things before I go home about 20 times, you know, and everything's double checked and what have you. So it's just having that ability to give yourself a break and you know, just being able to sort of like that, don't be ridiculous, and step away from that fear that you haven't done everything to your ability.
Oh, do you know what? I think that's a lovely way to round up. Thanks, Kelly. Because actually, like, you know, what better message is there about life about than being kind to yourself? You know, like fair play to you, like you calling that out. I think that's a good lesson for like everybody in life.
Yeah.
You know, and particularly like you say under the current like stresses that we have, is just remembering those times. So thanks very much, Kelly.
Okay.
You know, it's been wonderful. I feel totally enriched. I'm sure the listeners are going to love all those tools to help them out combat fear. You know, I'd also like to just say thanks personally on behalf of everyone's lives you've touched since you've started in your career. And I imagine there must be thousands and thousands of people out there are completely unaware of like what you've done for them and how you've helped them. So I'd like to say a big thank you on behalf of all of those people.
Thank you.
I'm sure half those people don't get the chance to actually be aware or say it. So thanks very much. And for our next podcast in the series, we'll be chatting to a guest around paralysis, which is the stage after fear, where actually after you've stopped being plagued by worrying about it, sometimes it makes you actually freeze, and we understand
yeah.
that has on us. So that'd be a super exciting next chat. So thanks very much, Kelly. I'd like to say goodbye. I'm out, and this is over and out.